start whenever you like.
All right, my name is Laura Moderhack. It is October 7th, and we are at the Glenview Public Library. I am interviewing Frank J. Olderr. His birthday was August 26, 1940. He served in the U.S. Navy as a second-class petty officer on the USS Colette during the Cold War and Vietnam era. Were you drafted into the war, or did you enlist?
No, it wasn't a war. I volunteered.
Volunteered service?
Volunteered for the service. My draft number had not been called. I had 2 years of college, and I decided, since my brother had gone into the Army, and my number couldn't be that far away, that maybe I better choose my service instead of becoming a dog face like him. So I became a white hat.
Was it just your brother, or had any of your friends been called in? No, just your brother. How long ago had your brother been called into service?
A year before.
A year before? What service branch did you choose to pick then?
I chose the Navy.
Navy? Any particular reason, or?
Well, I thought about the Air Force, but the Air Force, I thought I'd wind up in a field in northern Africa filled with sand. Because I was going to be an enlisted man and not an officer, I was not going to be flying. I'd be stuck there on that desert. And I thought, gee, if I could get on a ship, where the ship goes, I could go.
Right.
And that'd be much more interesting.
So you just thought you could go to more interesting places, basically? Do you remember your first days in the service, what it was like?
Oh, you mean like in boot camp?
Like boot camp, what was boot camp like for you?
Much too long, much more severe than I ever thought it would be. I never thought I'd see the end of it. And I even got branded when I was in boot camp. I had a week of KP, that was kitchen duty, if you like. And I had to get up real early in the morning, and they kept me up all day long, just working all day long. And one evening, I took a shower. It was cold in the room. It was wintertime. And I backed up into a radiator and got my butt burned.
Was that your only injury you sustained during?
No, I had another injury while I was in the Navy. We can get to that.
Yeah, okay. How long was boot camp for you?
I think it was 6 weeks, but that was a long time ago, so I'm not really sure.
Do you remember any of the officers? Do you have any specific memories?
Of boot camp. It was a chief petty officer, Bear, and he was drunk part of the time, and when he wasn't a very pleasant person.
Oh, so he was better when he was drunk?
I think so.
Yeah. Was it tough getting through it? Would you say that was one of the tougher parts?
Yes, it was.
Definitely?
Yeah.
Okay. So you didn't actually serve in a real war, it was the Cold War, right?
No, but it wasn't like we knew it wasn't, let's try that again. It wasn't like we knew what we were getting into.
Right.
And each day would bring something different. And sometimes because the ship was home ported in Yokosuka, Japan, if something was to happen in the Far East, we would be the ones that were sent. And when we left port any given time, we didn't know what it was for. Sometimes we were actually off the coast of Russia, off Vladivostok. It's the submarine port of the Russians. And we were close enough that I could listen to the radio and catch classical music from Vladivostok.
Do you remember what it was first like when you first went on the ship?
Yes.
What was the feelings?
Complete inadequacy. And everybody knew what they were doing and had a job to do, and I was kind of like tag along behind the lead ET. And as a matter of fact, my first general quarters when we went to sea for the first time, which was really exciting, coming out of Tokyo Bay, it was really quite exciting. And we heard the dong, dong, dong of general quarters. And I'd known what that meant. You go to your battle station. And then they said, this is not a drill. And everybody just kicked it into overdrive. Just flying and yelling and screaming and jumping and getting into where you should be. And it turns out, after about 10 minutes, we found out that it was a biologic that we'd stopped for. It was a whale that spotted on sonar. It wasn't an enemy submarine. So that was my first general
Just
quarters.
a whale.
Just a whale.
What was your job during that time? What would you do if that sound went off? What were you doing on the ship?
Okay, my general quarters station was to go to Radio Central because that was my job to keep the radios repaired. The radios and some of the cryptographic material. So my job was to be in Radio Central. If something went down, I was to fix it.
How was the life on ship? Did you feel cramped? Was it hard being at sea all the time?
Sailors belong on ships and ships belong at sea. and I believe that. It was cramped. You didn't really feel cramped. It was like suddenly you had about 20 brothers sharing the same small space, and the racks were sometimes 3, sometimes 4 high, but about that much difference. The space between the racks were, a rack, a bed was about that wide.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have like a daily routine that you went through? And was like every day kind of the same basically, or?
Every day was not the same. There was a daily routine that they'd get you up at a certain time. I've forgotten what it was, 6 or 6:30, something like that. They'd have morning quarters at 8 o'clock, and they'd account for everyone on board ship. That was particularly important at sea because if somebody went over the side, you wouldn't know it until the next day. Hey, where's Joe? You know? Then they'd give you a plan of the day and tell you what was expected for that day.
It was an older ship that had been used in World War II,
Yes.
but then it was like remodeled.
Yes.
So did it like seem old, or?
Yes.
It did, really?
When the typhoon would come, if we were down in the Philippines, for instance, I spent most of my time in the Far East, they would send us out to sea because the safest place for a ship is out at sea with plenty of freeboard around you, plenty of sea room. And so we'd go out and we'd just slowly go into the wind, and the ship would buck and heave and twist, and you could stand on the main deck with your back against the bulkhead, and you could feel the bulkhead do that. Just not much, just a little.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, give you the willies.
That's not very
And then you
comforting.
creak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were there any casualties in your unit, like people on the ship that just?
Because we weren't in nobody shot at us while I was on board.
Confront.
However, there's 2 things that ship has to be concerned about: the sea and the enemy. So, although we didn't have the enemy, we had the sea. And so, one time, refueling, I should mention this, refueling has to be done at sea every 3 or 4 days on a ship of that size. And so, every 3 or 4 days, if you're out at sea, you come alongside an oiler, and while you're going through the sea, and the water is swirling up in just like a terrible torrent, you have to throw a line over, bring the fueling hose over, connect the fueling hose, pump under pressure fuel from the oiler into your tanks, and then put it away. Well, the trouble is, if the sea's at all rough, then you're out there on the main deck, and you're hanging onto a line as an enlisted man. You're hanging onto a line, and you're letting it go or pulling it back, as the chief boatswain's mate tells you. And one day, we had a little bit of water, and it was coming on, maybe a foot over your, about up to here. People's feet were getting wet. Well, that wasn't too cool. And then came one waist high. And there we are in the main deck. Look at this thing. My God. And here it comes at you. Hang on to that line as best you can. And about 5 of us couldn't hang on. So we were thrown off of that. And I felt myself go against the side of the ship, the bulkhead on the side of the ship, and there was a ladder there, and I grabbed it. I couldn't see what was going on. I'm completely underwater. I grab on it. I ain't going to let go. I don't care. I let go of that. I couldn't hang on to it. And the next thing I thought, my gosh, I'm going over the side. And I got to get it clear of the screws, because the screws will just chew you to pieces. But I didn't know where anything was. And then all of a sudden, the wave went away. And there I was on the main deck. The snaking is about this high, the lifeline, and the snaking crisscross. And I was in that. And I looked around, and there was one guy up on a stanchion about this high, one of the posts that holds up the lifeline. And he was tottering on his hip, so a couple of the guys grabbed him. And they sent about 3 of us off to the sick bay. And I got into the end of the line because all I had was just a gash on my hand a little bit. So.
Another one of your injuries?
Yeah, that was my other injury. Yeah.
You showed us some of your medals. Can you explain what those are about? What they?
The medals are called service medals, and they're for things that the ship did while I was on board. While the ship was sent someplace, of course, the sailors on board were sent the same place. So when you were in dangerous areas, they gave you medals for this. We did patrol of the Taiwan Straits. It's in between Taiwan and mainland China. And we did patrols off of Vietnam. About a month after we left the Gulf of Tonkin, another ship was there, and it was called the Maddox, and the Maddox is the one that was fired upon by the North Vietnamese. So those were the two patrolling areas that were considered dangerous.
And then you got a medal for being good on the ship, for keeping your nose clean?
I got a medal for keeping my nose clean, doing what I was told, and performing my duty, yes.
How did you stay in touch with your family while you were in service?
There wasn't any email. There was
Right.
no thought of using a telephone. So we did it by mail, and I would communicated primarily with my mother by letter. And a few years before my mother died, this is long after I got out of the service, a few years before my mother died, she showed up at my front door and she said, "Here." She gave me all the letters that I had given her through 4 years. It was amazing.
Did you keep in touch with your brother? Because he was in the service at the same time. Where was he?
Okay, he was in two places. He was in Korea and in Germany later on. While he was in Korea, we made arrangements for him to come down to Japan, and I would be in Japan, and we could meet. The ship left Hong Kong, supposed to go to Japan. They decided, once we got clear of land, that we'd be going to Vietnam instead. Somehow my brother found out about that and says, "Oh, I'll cancel my leave." So he canceled his leave, but it takes a while to cancel your leave. In the meantime, we're heading toward Vietnam, and they suddenly turn around and say, "No, we're not going to Vietnam after all, we're going to Japan." So we got to Japan. We pulled into the dock, the lines are thrown across, the telephone is brought out on this rickety old line, and the telephone rings. And it's my brother, and he's in Kashina Barracks in Yokohama, and here I am in Yokosuka. And could I come? So I ran through a special request check that had to go all the way up to the executive officer to get approved, and he approved it. And so I left the ship and went up to Cassini Barracks to visit him just for an afternoon. And that was fun, so we took a couple of pictures of that.
Did you, were you able to leave the ship very often, or how often did you dock like that?
They gave us liberty based on whether you had the duty or not. If you didn't have the duty and you'd been a good boy, you could go on liberty. If you'd been a bad boy, you're stuck on ship. The duty sections were generally 3, so out of 3 days you might have 2 days of liberty after working hours or on a weekend.
What else would you do, when your brother wasn't there, what else would you guys do when you left the ship? What was there to do?
Different guys did different things. Some of them visited the bars, some of them, of course, some would go sailors for. They would spend their money on wine, women, and song, and the rest foolishly. Or you'd tour. They arranged several tours for us. We had one occasion where we toured Mount Fuji. We climbed to Mount Fuji. They arranged a tour for us to do that. That was nice. And in Hong Kong, we took a couple of tours as well.
What was the food like on the ship?
Everywhere you go in the Navy is the worst food that there is in the Navy, if you talk to other people. Everywhere I went in the Navy, I thought it was fine.
Yeah, no complaints?
No. I still miss a metal tray to eat in, with somebody going clang, and there's the mashed potatoes. And
did you feel a lot of pressure with your job, or stress, or?
Sometimes, yes. One time, I had two cryptographic receivers that I had to keep going. And when one of them was out, the captain would get nervous. So one time we were at sea, and to get to the receivers were located about 6 feet off the ground, and I'm no 6 feet. So I had to stand on a chair with my oscilloscope over here, troubleshooting cards to try to fix this. And the captain comes by and he says, "You gonna be able to fix this?" "Yes, sir." And I did.
How was your relationship? Do you remember certain officers that on board the ship that were they really harsh, or were they?
They were really decent, and some of them were very helpful. Very. They were good.
Did you ever have any kind of like entertainer come aboard the ship, like, or while you were on leave? Do you remember anything?
Oh yeah. We went. The ship went down to Atsuki Naval Air Station, somewhere in Japan. I forget exactly where. And we saw Bob Hope, and that was really a thrill. And they, brought a whole troop with them.
Right.
Oh, they just went nuts. There's thousands of guys out there. They'd say something half lame or half funny, and they would just make a big fuss over it.
That's awesome.
It was an awful lot of fun.
Do you remember any like other like humorous times while you were in service, or something unusual that happened?
Okay, let's see. I had something I set aside. Okay. We'll call this the ice cream caper. We're at sea. We're we're replenishing from a refrigerator ship. And one of the items was passed along was food. And the food is, in this case, some of it was for the chief's quarters, which was located forward in the ship. And so I'm walking back and forth and carrying food as it comes over. And I'm passing another shipmate, and I noticed just under a gun mount is this round container. So I pointed at it, and he says, "That's all." Okay, fine. Didn't say anything more about it. Later he says, "Bring a spoon to the ET room." Oh, okay. And so I found a spoon afterwards, and it turns out to be, it was ice cream, and it was intended for the chief's quarters, but we got it. So as I walk in the ET shack, I close the door, "Okay, everybody got the spoon?" And we started to work on 3 gallons of ice cream. Well, about 4 guys can't finish 3 gallons of ice cream. So we did what we could, and we knew we couldn't return it, because then they got you. So we waited till dark, checked things out, walked over to the side end. Rocky road.
How much did you guys finish? How far did you get?
Not much.
Not much? Did you often get like stuff like that? Was that like a rare thing to get, like ice cream?
We didn't get ice cream. The ice cream that we got, the ice cream that the crew got was made in the ice cream freezer that stood about that high and that big, and it was churned on the spot, and it tasted like it.
Not worth it?
You ate it anyhow.
Wasn't really ice cream?
Well, that's what they said it was.
Did you keep a diary or a journal while you were in the service?
In the Navy, we speak of logs. Yes, I kept a log. Unfortunately, many of the pages of my log were kept in pencil. Do you know what happens to pencil after about 40 years? It just fades out. Like your memories, just fades out.
Do you remember, you were in the service for 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
you said? Do you remember like the day that it ended, what that was like for you?
I remember just before it ended, I was at, what they call it, a transit barracks, where they separate you. And they give you the odd jobs to do. It doesn't matter what you are, it doesn't matter what you've done, doesn't matter how good you were, what you were doing, they give you odd jobs. One of my odd jobs was to guard, well, there's 2 things. Yeah, guard cars parked by enlisted men on the Navy base. By benefit of, I was out there in the middle of the night, and I had a telephone. And if somebody did something to a car, I guess I was supposed to pick up the phone and tell them. The other thing was, I worked at a grocery store where I would return the carts that Navy wives had taken out to their cars, and then me with my 2 stripes would go out there and take it back. And I thought, oh, how ironic, what a waste.
Did you, after you were discharged, did you go back home right away, or
Yes.
did you go back to school?
Yes, within about 2 weeks, I enrolled again in college, got myself a job, found some civilian clothes, and it was just a world.
Was that funded by the GI Bill? Did you use that? Or?
Yes, it was. Not initially. I had to wait for a while. There was like a lapse in the GI Bill, and then after I'd been back to college for a little while, it kicked in, and that was helpful.
What did you go back to college for?
Electrical engineering.
Yes, where'd you go?
IIT.
Oh, my dad went there.
Oh.
Did you make like close friendships with the men you served with on the ship? Did you like keep in touch with them?
Yes, I have, and I go to reunions, the ship reunions.
How often is that?
They have them once a year. I don't go every year, but they do have them once a year. And they also have reunions of destroyer sailors. That's larger than just one ship. All destroyers.
Where do these reunions take place?
All around the country, sometimes in Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, San Diego.
That's nice. Did you join like organizations afterwards, veterans organizations?
Not until about 10 years ago.
What made you want to finally join them?
Well, when I got out of the Navy, this would be 1965, and I was actually released from the reserves in 1967, and it wasn't a very popular time for servicemen. They were not treated with respect. So one of the things that I felt I wanted to do was to seek the company of those that had similar circumstances, but also to, well, not that it don't do it.
Yeah. Did like being in the Navy affect how you like think about war and like conflicts like that in general, or? I mean, you seem like you had a good experience in the war. It wasn't.
Good question. No, I don't think so.
No. Is there anything, any stories you'd like to add, or anything we haven't covered?
Okay, see. No, I don't think so.
No.
That's pretty good.
There are many men who served on the USS Colette over the ship's lifespan. How does it feel to be a part of that like legacy of men who've served on the ship?
A very deep pride.
Yeah.
Indeed. It's when you get together with a group like that, it doesn't matter what year you were on board. When you at a reunion, it's all the same thing. It was your ship, and you're proud of the ship, and you're proud of your service.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
More than welcome. My pleasure.
Can I ask one?
Oh,
I'm really curious. You came back from the service at a really interesting time. Did you share the fact that you had been in the Navy with people like at IIT? Like, was it something that you felt comfortable talking about?
Not at all. No, not at all. One of the things that I got out of joining the American Legion was after being in the Legion for just a couple of years, they asked for some volunteers for the color guard, and I thought that'd be interesting. And so it was really a thrill to walk down carrying the flag and have a wave of applause as you come along. It's just amazing. It just carries you along, this wave of applause. And I thought, my gosh, I waited 40 years to get acknowledgement of my service, which I freely gave, and I wanted to give. And I'm proud I was able to. And the strong part there is able to. A lot of people would like to do that and cannot. For one reason or another, they're not healthy. So.
Is that part of the reason you went right back into like getting a career right away? Is you didn't feel comfortable talking about being in the, like most people weren't very didn't treat the veterans very nicely after the war. They weren't respected.
Yes.
So is that part of the reason you got a career right away? So you could.
No, I wanted a career right away because I went to junior college to begin with, and then I went into the Navy. And then I came back and I finished up the 4 years. And it didn't take 4 years. It took me a long time. I graduated high school in 1958. I didn't get a job until 1968. That's 10 years. And it's very difficult to go back into college after you've been out for 4 years. It is very hard. You look at a page in a book and it just, hey, wait a minute, I haven't moved. And especially if it's a lot of math and so forth, and electrical engineering, it's math and science and all this stuff. It was very difficult. But it was worth it. I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
Let me add one thing. This is kind of curious. How did I become an ET? There's a question. I talked to the recruiter, and he says, well, what do you want to be? And I says, well, I don't know. I was thinking about maybe a machinist mate or an ET or something like that. He says, you don't want to be a machinist mate. I says, what's the problem with that? We'll be down in the spaces where it's really hot and dirty and greasy. He says, you want to be an ET. And I thought, oh, okay. And I filed that under the kindness of strangers. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to say nothing. He could have just let it go. And that really set my career path. Because once I've been trained as an ET, it's just a step to an electronics technician. It's just a step to becoming an electrical engineer. And that was really worthwhile.
That was the recruiting agent?
Yeah, it was a recruiting.
You think he would want you to just do whatever?
Yeah, we wouldn't really care.
That's really
But
nice.
he didn't. And so many times in your life, and, take advantage of it when it happens. When somebody gives you something free like that, like advice, that they know what they're talking about, take it.
I have a question. Can I ask something?
Please.
I searched newspaper articles online about the USS Colette, and I found one about a man. He was an officer, I believe. His name was also Frank J. And he served on the USS Colette for over 40 years. And I was wondering if you knew this man or.
What's his last name?
I don't remember his last name, but I thought it might have been you, because I was like trying to find more information, but
40 years.
yeah, cause no, he dedicated his life. He said like from the time he was born that all he wanted to do was be a sailor, and that he gave up everything to live on board, and
I'll be darned.
yeah. So I was just wondering if you knew this man, or what you thought of someone who would give up that much to live at sea. And
It's difficult to live at sea as a sailor because they insist on rotating you to shore duty. I considered becoming a career sailor, but then I learned that they'll only leave you at sea a certain length of time, and then you've got to go to shore duty. Some sailors feel, there's a saying, death before shore duty. You join the Navy to be a sailor, for crying out loud. To be out on the sea, to experience it. It's just an amazing feeling to go up on the bow and you're doing a power run. You go up on the bow and this great, huge wake on the other side of the bow, and it's complete silence. And sometimes there'll be a dolphin, going in front of the ship like that. Or you go to the fantail in a power run and you look at this rooster tail, 60,000 horsepower on this destroyer, 60,000 horsepower. Put 4 boilers on the line running, 2 turbines, full out, doing a power run. And you see this great rooster tail. You're out there on the fantail, and it's not smooth back here. You're bouncing around because any little imperfection in the propellers, or the screws as we call them, will cause it to shake. And it's just fantastic. It's just nothing like it. One of the things that they say, if you don't want to come back to the Navy, you take your steaming cap, which looks like a ball cap, it's a blue cap, and you throw it over the side your last time out. I did not throw mine over the side.
Did you see people doing that, or?
Well, I heard about people doing it. Want one more story?
Yeah, please.
A friend of mine's out there on the fantail, and I walk back. He's got the watch. He's the after lookout. He's got the sound-powered phones on. He's got the press-to-talk button in front of him. He's just kind of cooling it. I noticed off the lifeline on the back, on the rear of the ship, the fantail, there's this line going out. It's a rope, like that. And almost a rooster tail, not that much of a rooster tail. We were clicking along pretty good. I said, what's that? He said, oh, that's my laundry. I said, laundry? He says, yeah. So it's about ready to take it in. He walks over to the lifeline and starts pulling it in hand over hand. Here's his dungarees, right? They're not dungarees anymore, they're shorts.
You thought that would be a good idea?
Oh, all right. Yeah, undoes the line, throws them over the side. I've been able to contact that guy.
Yeah.
And I can call him up on the phone nowadays, and he's still that same kind of guy. Just, whatever. Some people, there's some aspects of people that really don't change throughout their lives. There's some little key that stays the same, some little spark. Anything
Yeah, I
else?
think we're good.
Good?
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.